So today, again, we're going to be looking at chapter 3 of Words of My Perfect Teacher, talking about the sufferings of samsara and, and thinking about this concept of samsara and nirvana and really where this path is pointing us to in avoiding those two extremes. Um, And then at the end, like every one of these sessions, we'll be taking all of that and creating um, a poem, some written words about what that means for us individually. So to start, I invite you to take a moment to really settle into your seat, settle the body, settle the breath. So there's this technique, it's called square breathing. Um, for if you're having trouble regulating your breath. And so this was uh really helpful for me as somebody who has dealt with a lot of anxiety and like really heightened emotions, and then that takes the body on a whole journey, and the breath can sometimes be hard to come back to. And so with a square breath, we go in counts of 4. So this is your own count of 4. You inhale for 4, pause. This is not holding the breath. It's not a forceful, but a pause in the breath for 4, exhale for 4, and then pause for 4. So I invite you to try a couple of those with me. So inhale, 2, 3, 4. Pause, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Pause, 2, 3, 4. And then in, pause, out, pause, in, pause, out, pause. And you can do this as many times as you need to connect back with that in and out cycle of the breath. And then resume breathing normally. This is, just setting a signal back to the body that a normal breath is okay. The body can kind of take off with some of these autonomic systems. It's the breath, the heart rate, the endocrine system. This is where our fight, reflexes come in, right? And they can tell a story totally separate from the reality of what's happening around us. And a lot of the stories that we create the suffering that we experience. And so by signaling to the body, helping the body relax, then we can turn on the mind and speech peace. We take refuge, and this creates for us. It's a protection. It brings up these, it's a refuge, these refuges that we practice coming back to. Create this space that's safe for exploration, that's safe for releasing. And so as we do that, we can visualize the refuge tree in front of us that's appropriate to the lineage you practice, or if that's not something that you have in mind, picture your teacher archetype that you practice, a representation of that, like Kuntozongpo, Kuntozongmo, Guru Rinpoche. And so those beings are in front of you. And as we take refuge, all of our teachers come and surround us. Sanje Chodange Dun Lachapsu Chiwo, Lama Yidam Kandro Lachapsu Chiwo, Sa Long Tigli Lachapsu Chiwo, Chuko Lonko Troko Lachapsu Chiwo, Rongsam Tongsam Nyo Lachapsu Chiwo. I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I take refuge in the teacher, the archetype, the Khandro, Pawo, what's a good word? What's a good translation? Consort is the literal translation. Salung, Tigli, the channels, the winds, heart drops. The threefold nature of existence, Dharmakaya, Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya. Form, formlessness, and the dance between. Can take refuge in that. And ultimately, the clear light nature of my own mind. I take refuge. And all of our teachers, guides, come together in the root guru. The root guru comes on top of your head and descends down the central channel into your heart. And all of the best qualities of all of these Buddhas, which are your qualities, your innate qualities, are all arising in your heart. And so we can think about the deep, open-hearted compassion, open-hearted, open-mindedness of our own guru, of our own teachers. And arise that within ourselves. And with that great open-heartedness, we invite all sentient beings into the practice with us. Mom and dad on either side, friends and other family around us, our enemies, perceived enemies, difficult people to deal with are in front. Neutral beings and strangers, kind of towards the outside. So we're all packed in here together. So when we talk about the sufferings of samsara, when Patrul Rinpoche talks about the sufferings of samsara, he goes through in detail the 6 realms and the sufferings that are specific to each of the realms. And so this is where he goes into the different hells, the hot hells, the cold hells, the ephemeral hells, what it's like to be an animal, to be hunted, to live with constant hunger, danger, fear. Talks about the Preta realm, the hunger, the thirst, the constant searching. In the Asura realm, the conflict that is never resolved. God realm, where you're so inundated with bliss. And then at the very end, it all gets pulled out from under you, and you're left alone to review your actions. And the human realm, where we get sick, get old, we die, we overthink things, we overthink things a lot. That's the big human one. Suffering of loss and gain and suffering upon suffering, right? And when Lama Lina talks about this concept, she distills it down into like 4 main types of suffering. So for the human realm, for us. So you've got the suffering of running from things you don't want, chasing after things that you want, suffering of getting what you don't want and actually experiencing that. And then the suffering of getting what you want. There's suffering on the other side of that, where, we fear losing it, or, we grasp at it, or we have the suffering of it being taken away. And that's really you can distill it even further down if you just have these sufferings of ignorance, craving, and aversion at a very subtle level. Either you don't know what's happening, or once something comes into your consciousness, you either like it or don't, and then build a story upon that. And so it can go into like all these levels of how departure from your practice essentially leads to suffering. There's this awesome sign that somebody painted that's over here in the Louisiana Himalayan Association compound, and it just says, "Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional." Man, it's just perfect, right? All of these things that are part of a human life, all the emotions and sensations that we experience, it's part of the experience. But what the Buddhist path shows us is that we don't have to suffer about it. That we can teach ourselves, train ourselves to stop the push and pull. But for this first writing exercise, what I want to do is another version of stepping into somebody else's shoes, right? So what I want to do is first let's take a couple minutes, and then in chat, we're going to put a personal victory from your life. So something where, you worked really hard or you went through something and then you came out on top and you had this, it's one of your own success stories. All right. So let's take a couple minutes and then type it into chat. And so let me think of one of mine. Mm. So great. So then what I'll do is for those listening to the recording, I'll read the ones that we have in chat here. Because what you're going to do, and I encourage those of you who didn't share yet to make something up, because what we're going to do is choose somebody else's victory from these. And so you're going to choose somebody else's and you're going to write about it as if it was your own story, your own struggles, and your own seeing the results of that. So I'm going to read what we have here in chat. So the first one is lost all of my physical belongings and home in a wildfire, battled with homelessness and bankruptcy, and was able to buy a house 5 years later. Then we also have growing huge harvests of fruit and vegetables in the first years when we came to this house. It's great. And then we also have, thank you, seeing the first 2 floors of the nunnery in Sopema being built as I tried to raise money for it after La Molina started it with her first donation. It's amazing. And so if you are listening to the recording, one of these speaks to you. And then same for you guys here. If one of these just is not doing it for you, pick something from somewhere, but like not your own story, somebody else's victory, like somebody wins an Oscar or something. I'm not saying you guys are not capable of winning an Oscar. I just don't think any of you guys have. You know, so pick something from here, which is what I would really encourage you to do. One of these three. And we're going to take a few minutes and write about that as your own story. And so we have just short little blurbs here. So, really make it up. Like, get yourself into that mindset of, yes, I've lost everything and now I'm rebuilding my finances, or I started with bare dirt and went on to grow huge harvests of fruit and vegetables, or starting with bare dirt and seeing the first two floors of a nunnery being built. And so, Pema, there's a little bit of a theme here. Um, or pick a victory from somebody else's life. That's the key point. Somebody else's victory, and we'll take 7 minutes and write about the struggles. Write about what it takes, or what it would take you to get there. Okay? Any questions? All right, I'm going to start the timer. And again, it doesn't have to be polished, just whatever comes out of your head. It can just be little notes, doesn't have to be a full-fledged short story by any means. I just want you to feel in your heart what that would be like. Okay, let's go. All right, it's about 7 minutes. So we've taken a moment to put on somebody else's suffering and give it a try. Would anybody like to share what they wrote or what their experience was like?
That's interesting that you said putting on thinking someone else's suffering, because I kind of forgot that we were talking about the suffering of samsara and was just going into it and wasn't really thinking about it necessarily as suffering. I don't want to read what I've written because I feel a bit too self-conscious. I was doing imagining into Misha's thing of raising money for the nunnery, but I feel a bit self-conscious reading that out with Misha here, who's actually been living it, and it's just my imagination. But what I was thinking, I have raised money for things before, and I also watched him doing this, an event, putting it out, and it's the tenaciousness, the constant tenaciously keeping at it, and the money comes in unpredictable drips and drabs, and just tenaciously promoting it, and then I don't know, and then the work of actually then getting the money into the Indian currency and finding the people who are going to do the work and getting the money to the right people who are doing the work, and a project like this, um, seeing it come on slowly as the money comes in, a bit more work can be done, and it's that tenaciousness. But I didn't really, that's not necessarily suffering, is it? And there's something in, like you said there, Lama Lena started it with her first donation. It's like fulfilling the Lama's wishes. It's like I hope, a great joy, as well as being, obviously there's going to be a lot of hard work, and that thing of, particularly in terms of suffering, I suppose there's a thing of you're putting out and not knowing what's going to come in. You just have to keep at it and keep at it and keep at it, and what happens is what happens. Um, and there can be suffering in that, I guess, if one isn't accepting that, being able to let go of a particular idea of when it's going to happen and what's going to happen, and just keep at it, putting the energy in and trusting. So yeah, that's what I did.
Thank you. Thank you. I well, I also wrote about building the nunnery. And similarly, yes, I'll just read. So just a little seed money and a vision. Build a nunnery in Sopema. Building a building is tough anywhere. The permits, the funding, the organization of labor and materials, navigating the weather and the politics, not to mention cultural differences that I had to overcome to be a useful part of the project. Brick by brick, beam by beam, phone call after phone call, late nights and early mornings, and literal blood, sweat, and tears. And not just me, dozens, maybe hundreds of people pouring their effort into this incredible structure. There was nothing than a great collective push, a groan loud enough, long enough that a whole building came from the noise. Every frustration released into something bigger than me, bigger than we, bigger than this lifetime. Generations of practitioners will benefit. So, yes, I had a similar kind of experience here of like, yes, there is some there is struggle, right? There's pain, there's discomfort, but ultimately how you write about it, how you think about it is what determines how much suffering is in there. Because I can imagine in the moment of like phone calls are just torture for me. Like there's some like immediate suffering there. But then, to rewrite it and just see it in a different way. And that's one of the great things about hindsight, right? Is I can look back and see the whole scope of the thing. Um, Misha, did you want to share? Or Tanya? No? Okay, cool. I'm curious to see folks who are listening to the recording if you want to share your thoughts on this in the Google Drive. Again, if you want to access the Google Drive to share what what you've written in these exercises, you have to sign up through the Lama Lina website so that I have your email, so that we're not just giving access to a Google Drive to everyone on the internet. Um, so yeah, Josh, you got at exactly what I was trying to get at, right? Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, right? And so we look at the bigger picture, which is something that, you know, it takes a different level of attention. It takes a different perspective altogether to look out, look at the whole thing. It's
Uh,
easy, oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. Well, so when I think about my thing I wrote about the harvesting a lot of fruit and vegetables, it's there's a lot of in a process of a big thing like that. There's a lot of little bits of suffering and happiness along the way, little achievements and little failings and things that go how you want and things that go how you don't want. And there's something about in the overall, like I was saying about how I was imagining with building the nunnery, this thing where you're just putting the energy in and having to trust. And the less attachment there is, the more kind of just being willing to do that, to just, which I know I have done in sometimes in my life, but it's quite hard to make yourself do that on purpose. It kind of like sometimes it can happen. And certainly with gardening, there's things that just are out of control. I mean, like this year, I was going to grow quite a lot, and I actually got some stuff going in pots and things, and then it just hasn't rained for 2 months. And I had a load of stuff in pots. So I just left them in pots. We're harvesting the lettuce out of the pots. There's no point. The amount of watering I'd have to be doing, the amount of, I just realized I'm not gonna put that amount of effort in. So just like dropping it. And other years, I don't know, you grow a load of stuff, and then in this country it can rain a lot, and then things get eaten by slugs and snails. And this whole thing, you have to kind of have this. The more attachment you have, the more you suffer. I think it's really, and I think a lot of any kind of big project is like that. Or even, I mean, a garden isn't necessarily a big project, but it can take over your life. We've got quite a big garden, and where we've been some years really self-sufficient, it's a lot of time and effort. And there's this thing of you're committed. Once you, by sort of May, you're committed. And like you put a lot of work in already, and if you don't keep putting more work in, you've wasted that work. So there's something about how you keep at it without attachment, or I would say from my experience, constantly dropping the attachment over and over again when you notice it, in order to have more enjoyment and less suffering. I think it's, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And this is exactly the Vajrayana path, which is what this first half of Words of My Perfect Teacher is paving the way for, right? These four thoughts that turn the mind is an exercise in creating a new foundation for your Dharma practice. Because what happens when we get to part two of the book and Patrul Rinpoche outlines the full extraordinary Nundro. This is a path of accomplishment, right? This is K-Rim. And so there is a level of goal setting and a level of ambition that's implied here. Of, I will traditionally, you set out to do your extraordinary Nundro and you make a commitment traditionally to do 100,000 prostrations, 100,000 Vajrasattva mantra, 100,000 mandalas, 100,000 Guru Yoga, right? And so you set out to do that, and you have a goalpost, you have a victory in mind, and there's all this stuff that comes up along the way. And it's the same stuff that you deal with every day, right? It's just now our attention is being turned towards something else. Our mindset is being changed. The way that the practices are taught does work on your channel pattern, on your actual physical saw, right? And so we're being asked to look at our suffering, look at all of our attachment and aversion in a different way, to transform it. Because the goal of so I have been told, the Vajrayana you will actualize Buddhahood in this very life if you practice properly. And so, in this very life, with what karma we have brought to the table in this moment, we're being asked to look at these things in a different way. So we're going to do, for this next one, we're going to do kind of the same thing, but different. And I want you to take a couple things from your own life and think of, okay, let's just take for a moment. Just rest for a moment. And just think about your past week or so of like what has been bothering you, really. And again, you don't have to share. So you can really pull up stuff that, like be honest with yourself. What am I chasing and what am I pushing away? Are there things in my life that I can't really change and I'm struggling with trying to keep it or trying to push it, but that's not really possible? And just like last time, I want to try to get a balance. If you're going to pick two things, try to pick something that feels feels good that you're kind of chasing after, and something that is unpleasant that you're pushing away. Like let's not go for full negative. That's too easy, right? So, pick a couple things and and, give a couple minutes to do that. Um, and I invite you to really be honest in the way that Patrul Rinpoche asks us to be honest about our motivations and our like real inner thought patterns and behavior patterns that only we really notice, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to take these two or three stories that we've been telling ourselves of like, this is good, so I'm going to chase this, and this is bad, so I'm going to run from it, is essentially the stories that we're working with, right? And what I'm inviting you to do is take refuge again. And in that context of refuge, because remember, your primordial wisdom is still like gushing forth from your heart, right? All of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are still right there in your heart with you. Here in this session, all sentient beings are surrounding you, hearing you, loving you. Your own body, your own physical body is continually here to support your practice, this exploration, right? And so in that context, where we zoom way, 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 way out, I invite you to rewrite this story. So I'm going to throw out an example of a common one. Money feels tight, and I've been stressing out about how much money I have and getting my bills paid. Okay, that's a common struggle. And so again, we're here in this field of refuge that's both ordinary, physical, and extraordinary at the same time. And I can lay that out in this context. How can I rewrite that story in this context of this is just a human experience? And if I can take myself out of it and go way out, how can I rewrite that? How could you, if you're having trouble with that, try looking at it from, one of the many sentient beings in the room with us brings you this problem and lays it out and says, I'm having trouble with my bills. How can you rewrite that in this context of, being asked to we're not bypassing any discomfort, right? Pain is inevitable, right? It's part of our experience. Yes, money is tight, but you don't have to suffer, or whatever your things that are bothering you are. Are we understanding kind of where I'm going with this? I want to bring it back to how do I say this another way? Understanding that this human experience is very impermanent. Not just the human experience, but the precious human experience is impermanent, right? So this ability to, if we didn't have Dharma practice and I just said, my bills are tight or my money's tight and I'm suffering from it, the very worldly answer is, well, work harder. cut your budget. That really sucks. You should feel bad because you're not being productive enough, right? Like all these stories pop up that are like part of the samsaric cycle, right? Or even don't worry, it'll get better. Or, these ways of like layering positivity over it where it's not really realistic. What would a Buddha tell you about your story? I mean, like let's go that way. Let's go that way. Imagine your favorite Buddha, your favorite enlightened being. Again, in a beyond Tibetan Buddhist context, this could include any number of awakened awakened beings. Jesus could count for you if that's your mindset, right? Or choose your favorite Tara or Chenrezig and ask them to help you rewrite the story of your craving and aversion, where the reality is not bypassed, but the suffering is taken away. Does that make sense? Okay. I know this is a tough one. This is like these things get tougher. We're not, we're we're starting from ground level and we're rebuilding a lot of stuff, okay? Um okay, so let's try that. Let's try that. Let's try rewriting this. Rewriting these stories from the past week or so of where we're getting stuck. And take refuge. And I want to write from that context of where the Buddha's big B, that primordial wisdom is in your heart. And you're rewriting this story in a way where the suffering is taken out. Whatever that craving or aversion is, take that out and rewrite it. Okay? So I'm going to start the timer in 7 minutes. Okay, that's 7 minutes. So finish our thought. So before I share, I'm curious what if any of you had some writing or insights or your experience from this exercise that you'd like to share. Well, if y'all don't mind, I'll go ahead. So for me, this kind of came out as like advice to myself. I felt very um like this was a very down to earth version of the wisdom being inside of me, right? Just relating these different parts of myself, the one who suffers and the one who knows that suffering is optional. And we kept coming back to impermanence. And just these things change. These things are constantly shifting, what you want now, what you don't want now, that's going to change. What other people want, what other people think is constantly changing. Even your own perception of the situation is changing over and over again. And also just something else that came out was just this reminder of like you're bigger than that. Like you're bigger than that story. This you're bigger than your body. There's so much more happening around you, and that is all interconnected, that just this little story of, the big one for me is like physical, my body. I have this running story of my body gives me trouble, right? It's one that I wrestle with a lot. And just that story is so like, what body? Whose body? What is that? This is just an experience you're having. Like it's you could die in the next minute. Why not, what we're doing is so much bigger than that. Which is, this exercise, I had a little bit more profound of an experience than I typically do when I do this self-talk with myself, of these reminders. But this felt very like, yeah, like the wisdom being part. Really wanted to talk. Any of you want to share your experience too?
I can happily share. I'm aware that I often do, so I have to kind of wait for other people, but I'm always one who can talk a lot. So I've had a similar experience of kind of giving myself advice. I felt like I'm kind of channeling the wrong word, but kind of drawing on the advice and teachings of particularly Lama Lina, but also the Zen teacher that I studied with a lot, Tenchi Mivanda Roshi from San Francisco Zen Center. He has a particular approach which is similar in some ways to Lama Lina's, a very different personality, emphasizes a lot of a kind of very big mind, self-compassion attitude. Anyway, and I was looking at, there's a few things I caught when you said what's bothering you. There were quite a few different things, but what I picked out was this kind of double pattern I've got of quite a lot of things that I'm kind of juggling, and I struggle when I'm juggling a lot of different aspects at once and different things that need my attention, but what do I prioritize? And then alongside that, this pattern that keeps recurring in me and has been going on for so long of kind of procrastination and getting caught up in. I'm just one of these people who can like just not feel like going to bed and then binge watch like literally all night, you know, and just go for that. And it's not like I completely lose my mindfulness and stuff in that, but there's a part of me that just wants to do it. And so anyway, so there's this double pattern there because obviously the wasting time or not getting enough sleep affects, it makes me less efficient. But what came through was really this thing of like, this is a great one. This is a really chewy. This is Reb's kind of teaching. This is like a chewy koan. You know, this is like a big chewy. I've been chewing on this for years. It's like a big patterny thing for me, and it's such an opportunity. And it's just about again and again and again bringing it onto the path. And what particularly came through was I've had so many teachings over the years, and things that I have been putting into practice, or things that I put into practice a little bit, different ways of working with stuff. Really, like in terms of, you know, sutra, tantra, dzogchen, different things within each of those. And it's like there's ways of working with this pattern, with loads of different things. And what came through particularly was like, you can't do everything at once, but I can actually take a particular practice. So like what Logan Dorrit's been teaching, and I haven't joined it this time, the mandala of the five Buddhas, for example. So that work and the working with emotions work, or applying the 6 parameters, that I can actually go, okay, let's chew on it in this way for a week, a month, whatever, and keep trying to apply that. So it's a huge opportunity for me to try and put things more and more into practice in personal experience. And then the other side of it is that I've been realizing that some of it may relate to something around kind of ADHD or something like that. And I work as a counselor and I work with people with ADHD. And so there's also something of like, I can learn from it on that level as well and be able to implement that for other people. It's also a kind of compassion exercise that I can be like, when I work on myself on a therapeutic level as well as a sutra tantra dzogchen level, and I can like help other people. So I can put into practice things on that level. So yeah, it was just all about this thing of just like, great, this is practice. This is your life. This is your practice. It was that whatever the so-called problem is, whatever's bothering you, that's where your practice is. And that's really, yeah, it comes from Reb a lot for me, but it's also comes from like the Lojong teachings. It's definitely there in a lot of Patrul Rinpoche and stuff. It's just there, yeah, cross Buddhism, isn't it? It's like that's right where your life is. That's where your practice is, and that was the kind of message that came through, if you like. I know that already, but I kind of have to encourage myself that over and over again because it's like that's what I wrote somewhere. It's about moment by moment, actually making the decision to apply that.
Yes.
And remembering to apply it and making the decision to apply, okay, what, and to be playful, I think, like, okay, what practice shall I put with this now? Okay, you know, and I have enough different practices that I can be playful. I don't have to be rigid. So, yeah, it's quite encouraging myself, it felt like, which is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's all, we have these stories that we tell ourselves about our experience because that's just the nature of a human, right? That is part of what we're working with. And so, we tell these stories, but the stories are all based on our past conditioning. Eons of conditioning, eons of telling the same story over and over again, or slightly different stories, chasing security, chasing safety, chasing food, chasing love, running from danger, running from war, running from famine, and so now we are met with a precious human life, with a full human opportunity where that's not the story anymore. We have lifetime upon lifetime of conditioning to tell us to run or to grab. To listen to the survival instinct. There's nothing wrong with the survival instinct. It's how we survive, right? If your feet are hot, you should check that they are not on fire before you squash your survival instinct and let them burn, right? We want to use common sense here. But what what Words of My Perfect Teacher is asking us to do is to really say, like, that's no longer the narrative, or rather, that narrative does not serve Dharma practice, right? Having a full human opportunity, a precious human rebirth. Remember, there are things that are required for that. And by having, those who are listening to this, who are participating in this, those that are here in the Zoom today, those that are catching up with us later on, you have a full human opportunity. You have a general level of your safety and security needs being met. You have a general level of ease in your environment. You have a general level of like intellect and learning capability and the ability to understand and communicate complex ideas, not just I'm hungry, I'm cold, I need to get food or shelter, but I want to experience love. We can talk about compassion, we can talk about impermanence, right? These are things that you can't necessarily, as far as I don't know the language, how to talk about impermanence to a lizard. They may have their own, but I don't have that capability, right? So we have, we've been born in a place and time where the Dharma is accessible to us. We have cultivated a lifestyle. Again, this is your own merit. This is your own doing. You have cultivated a lifestyle with enough space to untangle these past stories that we've been telling ourselves about survival, value judgment, right? This is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad. I'm being productive, I'm being unproductive. People like me, people don't like me. These are stories. These are stories. And as Lama Lena has taught us over and over again, these stories, when you really pull them apart, what are they made of? You can't make a solid thing out of it. You pull it apart, you see right through it. It's mind made. And that's exactly where it dissolves. Right in the mind. And if we were in a different realm, we'd think about our suffering in a different way, right? If we were in the animal realm or the predator realm, you can even think about the different realms of experience within the human experience, right? Like when you're in great pain, I don't know, you've had a serious injury, and when you're in pain, all you can think about is pain. Unless you've done enough practice to remember, even when you're in hell, that the pain is temporary, that the story you're telling yourself about the pain is empty. That's the word. And that there are ways to move your attention that will release you from the suffering of the pain. But this goes for the other end of the spectrum as well, right? We don't want to get caught in the bliss of nirvana, which has its own suffering, right? Because you can't maintain that, right? I mean, even just a very mundane, worldly hit of nirvana, of the bliss of orgasm, right? You can't maintain that. If you're really lucky and you have good technique as a woman, you could make it last for several minutes. But then it's gone, right? You can't hold on to that. Chasing that can be very destructive, you know. The same with the more, bring it back to practice, achieving a bliss state in meditation. Say if you practice shine for a long time and you get really good at shine, shamatha meditation, days can go by and you're just sitting and it's perfectly blissful. You don't feel or think or experience anything but bliss. And it's quite lovely. And then you come to and you realize you haven't eaten in several days and you really need to pee and your legs are sore. And it all comes crashing down. And you'll never have that experience again. So this is something to remember, right? We have to come back to remembering this over and over and over again, that the highs and lows and all of the movement of chasing and running, pushing and shoving and pulling and mucking around, all of that movement is unnecessary. And to use the tool of remembering or mindfulness. I just have an argument with what modern New Age language has done to the word mindfulness. But it is the right word. The tool of mindfulness, the tool of remembering. Remember to take refuge over and over and over and over and over again. Because it's in this context of coming back home where all of the wisdom beings reside, where your innate Buddha nature resides, where all phenomena arise and dissolve. Coming back to this over and over, that's where all of the practices that we've learned come from. That's where we create space to take in the teachings, like we did in our first week, right? We put it all aside and we open ourselves up very wide, and we allow ourselves to receive the teaching, right? Why? So we can remember it later. So let's try to fold this up, because we're already at an hour and a half. Let's try to fold this up. 2 or 3 or 4 lines. Of, you know, what your experience is of this suffering of samsara, right? And remembering how to rewrite that story, and the ways that you connect back with the wisdom parts of yourself to remember to rewrite your story in a way that takes the suffering out. All right. So take another 7 minutes. And again, if you're having trouble thinking of what to write here, look back at what you've already written today. Look back at what you've experienced through this session. And just take 2 or 3 or 4 little phrases and put them together. Again, this is mostly for yourself. This is mostly so that we're training our ability to remember that this is, that we have this foundation that we're building, and that the foundation is solid. So this is not about creating a masterpiece. This is not about any, I would love if your writing improves, but I also don't care. I really just, we're trying to understand this teaching in a way that we can carry with us instead of leaving it in the intellectual. So, again, don't think too much. Don't suffer about this. Just 2 or 3 or 4 lines of what suffering, what suffering means for you, and what remembering that you don't have to suffer means for you. Okay? So we'll set the timer. 7 minutes. right, that's 7 minutes. We'll wrap up what we're writing. Would anybody like to share? I can share what I wrote to start us off. I never mind. I'll just sit here and talk at you as long as you'll listen. Okay. Dust in the wind, sand in the surf, collecting in and around a heartbeat. Stories arise and vanish like clouds or coastlines. A body like any body, any rock, any planet. Anybody else? All right. Yeah, so as we wrap up, I want to remind again that the purpose of these sessions is ultimately for you to pick through your own thoughts, feel in your heart what is the essence of these teachings, and to find those gems and polish them up for yourself so that you can remember the essence instead of chewing on a whole book in your mind over and over again, as we tend to do with as Westerners, but to really like feel for yourself, what is the essence? What is the bit that you will keep with you to remember as you go along the path? Because again, what this is preparing us for, what it's training our mind for, is to really make huge transformations in the way that we think, in the way that we behave, in the way that we interact with the world. And to let go of some of these stories, especially the ones that have been carrying us through for millennia, lifetime over lifetime, the ones that we keep coming back to let some of those go feels really, really scary. It can feel very confusing. And so the more deeply we can understand these concepts of having a full human opportunity, of understanding impermanence, understanding the suffering of samsara, and then next week we'll talk about karma and how that works, and talk some more about that. The more deeply we can feel this for ourselves, the better time we're going to have when we're somewhere else, when we're taking something unfamiliar on the path. So, ultimately, as lovely as it is to share, this is for you. This is for you, and for you to polish those gems up for yourself, and so that you can come back to them. So we're gonna wrap this up. So again, let's come back, close this up properly, right? We do the practice. And then we dedicate the merit. So energetically, what this does is, we do our practice and it builds Gewa, creates opening, creates these positive, experiences. There's great benefit to Dharma practice of all kinds, right? And so then what we do is we gather that up, and we can gather up our gratitude for all of our teachers, all the wisdom beings that have been with us through the practice, all of the love and compassion that we may have generated for other sentient beings here with us, even just the joy of sharing Dharma with people, even just the pleasure of being with your friends, all of that benefit. And then we give it away. We send it out. We dedicate it to all sentient beings on the path and all those who have not yet found the path, who are on their way. Kewadi nur duda chechi sala gopashok. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop this recording. Stop recording.